Deliver Us the Moon is a third-person, narrative-driven adventure game. It was developed in the Unreal 4 engine by the Dutch studio KeokeN Interactive. The game was first released on Steam in 2018. Then in 2019 they upgraded it with a new free final chapter. And then they released that version a bunch of more times. In this game the Earth isn't doing too well. So the human race colonized the moon. And up there they try to harvest a new energy source that can hopefully save the Earth. But suddenly the moon colonies go dark and they stop all of their communications. So you, the player, take control of an astronaut. And it's up to you to uncover what has happened on the moon. There is a specific part around the middle of the game that I want to talk about. Copernicus Outpost 1. It's the part of the game that I had the main responsibility of creating. I interned at KeokeN as a level designer for 8 months. 3 of which were spent only on this outpost. And the rest of the time I mostly touched up other parts of the game. And I didn't make this outpost by myself. Making games is a team effort. And at this point KeokeN had around 20 employees. So some talented developers also helped out. In this video I will play through the entire outpost and talk about the different design decisions that were made and why. This was around 6 years ago, so it's possible I might misremember some details. And since the outpost was my responsibility, the mistakes I'm gonna mention are all on me. But maybe I can come up with some new improvements as we go along. But before we start playing, let me give you some context first. A lot of research went into the landscape of the moon and keeping the science of the game realistic. I joined after the pre-production phase was done. So there was plenty of research material ready for me to get a feel for the game. And another developer had already started working on the outpost before me. But it wasn't much more than a hollow cube. This room I vividly remember looking a lot more like this. So my very first assignment was to take this outpost and see if I could make it into something more refined. These were my initial guidelines. The longer we worked on it, the more things got added. The stakes weren't that high, because the outpost was going to be scrapped entirely, and it wasn't that essential to telling the story yet. So a level designer creates levels by using basic geometry. This is to make the experience easy to edit. But since I joined in the middle of development, there were a lot of assets ready to go. So I also set dressed some areas. Level designers often don't get to do that. It's usually a level artist's job. But if you work at a smaller studio, you might have to do the work of many different roles. We could also playtest our levels with a feature-complete astronaut. It's not the one that ended up in the final product, but it was enough to make me feel immersed. It's just nice whenever you don't have to stare at those old Unreal template characters. I can't even look at the Unreal 5 one without thinking, they look very familiar. Before you reach the Outpost in the game, there are 3 major locations that you visit. There's Earth, a space station, and the Moon Hub. And throughout this journey you learn some important features. You can grab staircases and move them around. You have a tool that can slice open special seals. You got a companion droid called Ace that you can use to traverse tight spaces. If you're anywhere without oxygen, your air supply will deplete over time. And by collecting audio logs and using Ace to play old holograms, you can learn important details to your investigation.
I'm not leaving, Will. Not like this.
I'm not asking. Get her on the ship.
Is this really...
When you finally reach the moon, you find it completely abandoned, and important machinery has been turned off. To fix the root of this problem, you need to go to another moon base called Tombow. Luckily, you find a monorail station. Or monorail station. There you board a train towards Tombow. But on the way over there, you get obstructed at an outpost. And this is where my level begins. Okay, so that's an awkward start. Immediately turning 180 degrees feels a bit unnatural and forced. Usually third-person games give you more space to do those kinds of turns. There's no space for that here, so we should have just had the player spawn looking the other way. Before we enter the new area, we can see a door on the other side of the windows. Once we're off the train, we get the name of the outpost. If you've looked at any maps earlier in the game, this becomes especially informative. This sign also shows what direction the other bases are. Since we are trying to get to Tombow, it would have been more useful if the sign told us where that is. The railings lead to a descending staircase, so that's one way we could go. But if we do that right away, we can miss out on what our new objective is. Therefore, there are also some ascending steps to your left. They make the computer a lot harder to miss. The door we saw from the train also guides us to the computer in a way, because it becomes a point of interest, something the player wants to check out. Then once they figure out it's locked, they turn around and... This technique is often called a bait and switch. The computer is inaccessible without the correct code. Since it's close to the track, we can assume that the computer is related to the monorail. This note is obviously a hint. Too bad we have no idea who Frank is. Down the stairs we bump into a hologram.
All Copernicus 1 colonists, this is an evacuation. The reactor at Tombow has suffered a critical malfunction. We're here to evacuate you to Copernicus Moon Hub.
Whoa, calm down. Who sent you?
We're here on official orders of the Lunar Council.
The Lunar Council? Frank, do you see anything strange happening across the MPT network?
I've got nothing out of the ordinary.
Hey, now we know who Frank is.
We don't have time for this. Just take them.
What? Get your hands off me!
Evacuation crew to MacArthur. We're progressing to stage 2. Outpost crew and the package are on their way to Moon Hub.
If we go and check out the door where Frank was leaning, we notice that it's locked. Even if we skip the cinematic, we're able to deduce that Frank lives beyond this door. So maybe they keep their code in there too? The pipe right next to the door hints at an alternate way to enter. By the way, this corner is very easy to miss at first, because when you come down the stairs, this is awkwardly placed behind you. So just in case, we made sure to show the area in the cinematic. And when the hologram is done, we even angle the player towards that area. If we wanted players to know about the door without watching the cinematic, we could have also blocked this little gap. Then the player would have to turn and notice the door before being able to progress. While we're here, I want to bring up environmental storytelling. I believe that the second you create something, you start telling a story, even if it's not your intention. When a player sees what you have created, they will make up their own story. So you should do everything you can to help the player interpret the scene like you want them to. If you don't think about the story and only focus on gameplay, you can get stuck with cubes that you have to somehow justify later. So now we're stuck with barrels that make no sense to store in the middle of the room. This kinda reminds me of Deus Ex Mankind Divided. It's a game where they put a lot of effort into the story. But it's also a cover shooter. So when they made covers for this high security corporate building, they went with cardboard boxes. Sorry, what? These boxes are clearly only here to serve as covers. So this world becomes a lot less believable. There was at least an attempt to integrate them into the narrative, but
Hey, what's with all these boxes?
Didn't you see the updated report? Delivery guys put the shipment of new server parts in the wrong place. Said it wasn't their job to move it afterward.
That's pretty weak. Anyway, Deliver Us the Moon doesn't have any combat, so we didn't have to deal with that problem. But we did think a lot about the story when creating our environments. A big theme in this game is abandonment. So there are many big empty spaces that people have just upped and left. There are also a lot of windows looking out to the vast and empty moonscape, making you feel even more lonely. My small outpost doesn't have that many windows, but the rooms are still pretty big. And in this one I wanted it to be clear that there has been a struggle. So I flipped a table. The environment also has these neat carpets, plenty of tables, and an overfilled sink. These help the place feel lived in. This table has to be the worst for eating though. Telling stories through props is great, but this room has too much clutter. The props make it feel janky to walk around. In third-person games it's especially important to give the camera enough space to not hit any of the surroundings. So a lot of this clutter could have been removed, but the best fix would have been to make the room bigger. And you know, maybe fine-tune some of the collisions. Anywho, from here, the window is supposed to work as a point of interest to make you want to go down the hall. I wanted to give players a sense of progression by showing them how far they've come from Moonhub, but there are so many obstructions that it doesn't really come across. This might also look like a dead end, but to proceed you actually need to turn around. For this reason we placed a window in the hallway so that you can see there's more space on the other side of the wall. There's also an audio log there that becomes a second point of interest. Architecturally speaking though, this window doesn't make any sense. Anyway, now we have to do another 180-degree turn. Doing that over short distances feels a lot like navigating through queue barriers. It doesn't feel nice. It would feel a lot better as a 90-degree turn. At least there's more space to do the turn here than there was in the train. Next up we have a ladder. Right, fall damage. I could have raised the floor below a bit higher. But to be honest, this height doesn't even look lethal. The lamest solution to prevent you from accidentally killing yourself would be to create invisible walls. But who would do that? Me. But only at the start of the level for some reason. I sadly don't remember why. It's not a lethal height. Maybe it just looked goofy. I think everybody can agree that invisible walls are the worst. They highlight that the area and game mechanics don't mix. Also, I love being able to jump. It makes traversing and exploring a lot more fun. So please, game developers, stop taking my jumps away. By the way, the audio log was partly placed here so you have something to listen to while going down the ladder.
I traveled to this outpost from Moon Hub, where I was sent to investigate the blackout together with my expedition partner.
This elevator is out of power, and it's only here to show that normally people don't enter this room through a ladder. In this room I wanted you to notice a vent and the means to reach it from the same angle. There are a few problems with this puzzle though. The audio log could still be playing, so it's hard to simultaneously look around for puzzles.
We were unable to bring the MPT back online.
The movable staircase can be mistaken for just a regular prop. And the vent is too high. And players very rarely look up. But don't just take my word for it. There you go. I think if one of these lights were loose and dangling, it could draw enough attention to make you look up. And the stairs would be more obvious if we got rid of some of the clutter. Down here is a steep ramp and an elevated parking spot. These limit the player's movement while dragging the staircase, so they don't go all around the room looking for the wrong solution. But I have no idea what the in-world explanation would be for a ramp that goes down to a second ramp going up. A broken down moon rover would have been a perfect, logical obstruction. Then there wouldn't be any need for an odd second ramp. Oh well, let's do the puzzle. Now we can use Ace to traverse the pipes. These lines are pretty useful to show when a turn is coming up. Without them it could look like you're heading down a dead end. There are many twists and turns in the pipes though, so it's still very disorienting. But if you happen to look the correct way, you can get a glimpse of the communal space. This is an attempt to help you regain your mental map. But it is extremely easy to miss. I think it would have been more effective if there was a long stretch towards the opening. The pipes take Ace to the sleeping quarters, and right away there's a note on the wall with 4 numbers on it, in Frank's room. There's also a shutter that Ace can leave through. If a player missed a glimpse in the pipes before, they should now realize where they are. The rest of the sleeping quarter is dressed to make it believable that 3 people used to share this room together. Another developer also put a bunch of bottles here as an inside joke, because my desk might have not been the tidiest. Makes me wonder what minute details in other games are actually Easter eggs. There's also a collectible in here that you can't grab as Ace, so we're gonna have to return as the astronauts. But before we start backtracking over there, here's a twist. When I first started working on this level, you were supposed to reach the outpost by driving a moon rover. And the garage was going to be where you started. We still wanted the player to go check out the monorail computer, so the entire level is designed to lead you there. But another rover segment was being created at the same time, and the game got repetitive with both of them. So we scrapped one of them and made it into a monorail trip instead. Therefore, the level now had to start at the monorail station. So we had to come up with new ways of guiding the player to a lot of different locations. In the older version, you would have also been able to drive around the perimeter of the outpost. So I actually created the outside of the building first, which was a huge problem. If we wanted to change or add any additional rooms, we would have to redo a lot of the exterior as well. So we never did. And there were definitely more rooms that we wanted to add. For instance, there are 3 people who lived at this outpost, yet there's not a single bathroom. It might sound silly, but a thing like that does make the world a lot less believable. But that's the thing with game development. There are milestones to hit, so you don't always have the privilege to prioritize a toilet. However, because I polished the outside so much, it was used in some of the marketing. It's one of the first things you see on the Steam page. So that's kinda cool. On the way back, we can now unlock the sleeping quarters. It needs the same code as the monorail computer, which can definitely confuse players.
I'm missing something, though. A code. Is there something on the back? Nope. So 1881. That can't possibly be the same code. I mean, I guess we can try it, but I doubt it. What?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense that the same code is used for both the computer and the sleeping quarters. Then everybody who sleeps here would know the computer code, not just Frank. I think it would have been so much better if Frank just had a computer code on his tablet. I'd also like it better if you could use Ace to unlock the room from the inside. Then we wouldn't have to use the same code twice. In here we can rummage through other people's belongings and find a collectible comic book and some world-building emails. And that's about it. I might have also made a small mistake in this area.
Whoa, what was that? Did something just... Oh! Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can see this. Yeah. The door. It's the top of the door. Oh, that's hilarious.
Whoopsie dipsies. This actually got patched by the other developers after I was gone. So you can't do that anymore, at least. But yeah, let's use the code on a computer. Okay, so maybe that didn't happen. And instead it turns out there's no power to the monorail station. But we now have the option to unlock a maintenance area where we can investigate further. That right there is the maintenance area. A sign could have made that clearer. In there we have a stairwell, and oh, do I want to talk to you about stairs. Let's say, for instance, that you want to make a staircase for an old Japanese building. Then the first step would be to research what architecture techniques they used in Japan back then. So sadly for us at KeokeN, it turned out that the NASA webpage didn't have any stair regulations for the moon. But there are some general tips on how to create modern stairs that are pretty universal. Let's go through some of them. If you only need 2 steps, maybe it should be a ramp instead. In real life it is very easy to stumble if there are only 2 steps. That's not really an issue in video games, but it's good to at least be aware of it for realism. If your stairs only angles at 10 degrees, it should definitely be a ramp instead. Otherwise you're gonna have some deep steps that aren't really warranted. Having stairs makes more sense if the angle is above 10 degrees. And when making stairs, never go over a 40-degree angle. Then it's too steep and it will feel like climbing a wall. Even 40 is cutting it a bit too close. 30 degrees tends to be the sweet spot. Also, make sure that the camera doesn't do this. Yeah, I'm nauseous already. One way to avoid this is creating invisible blocking volumes to form a ramp over the stairs. Much better. If you have too many steps, break your stairs into sections. The more steps you need to climb before a break, the more dangerous the stairs will feel. So unless you're trying to scare the player, do not exceed 18 steps in a single section. Put landings in between the stair sections. These should be at least as deep as the steps are wide. Otherwise it can feel like there's no space to move around. And lastly, steps should be consistent in its height and not vary. At least not in the same section. If the steps suddenly change distance between them, that definitely becomes a stumble risk. I broke some of the stair guidelines in this level. The computer desk is only 2 steps high. The steps need to pique your interest, so it felt warranted here. The ramp in the garage is way steeper than 10 degrees, and it's not really justified. And even though this landing is as deep as the width of the steps, I would have liked it bigger and less cramped. I also think this gear could have been in its own locker room. You know, so you wouldn't have to change clothes in the middle of a stairwell. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to use these guidelines, but not limit yourself to them. I hope you've enjoyed this tangent about stairs. Most of these I learned from seasoned level designer Tommy Norberg. So if you're eager to learn more about designing stairs, they have a great Twitter thread about the subject. I will link it in the description. So after ascending the stairs, you have some new information in front of you. There's a hologram, a shutter, a closed airlock, as well as a sightline to some machinery outside. Let's check out the hologram.
Evacuation crew to MacArthur. Helium package and Copernicus Outpost 1 personnel have arrived in Moon Hub, sir.
Seal the door and make your way to Moon Hub. Fuel needs to be in place before we arrive with the Tomboy evacuees.
Sir, the other crew won't make it in time if I do that. They'll miss the launch.
They know what they signed up for. Seal the door, now.
Yes, sir.
So now we know the gate was closed on purpose. Maybe the machinery outside could be related to that. And with the airlock not working, the shutter is the only way forward. So let's use Ace. Okay, so this is another big problem. When you go from an area with air to one without it, you have to pass through an airlock. You just enter it and close the door behind you. Then you're locked in while all the air decompresses. When there's no more air in there, the door outside opens. The hyper-realistic game Jedi Outcast has a good example of what should happen if you don't pass through an airlock. There's so much air that would escape that Ace would just fling out. On the other side of the pipe, we have a puzzle that was created by the other, more talented designers. There are panels, a bunch of cords, and 4 generators. The generators show 3 different states: red, yellow, and blue. Throughout the game, the color red has been used to indicate that stuff isn't functional, whereas blue means that something is working. And yellow is kinda the in-between. So the player should be conditioned to quickly figure out that all the generators need to be turned blue. Interacting with these panels changes the state of the generators. If you follow the cords, you see which generators are linked to what button. With the puzzle solved, the first change players will notice is that the airlock in front of them has unlocked. Outside, you can get some context to how the generators were sabotaged. You can also go around the corner to get a clearer look at where you came from. In an earlier version, when the stairwell room was just a ladder, you used to enter the roof from here. That's why this path was created. So now this catwalk just leads to a dead end instead. I should have probably deleted it. You can also use Ace to fly around and look at the outpost from all the different angles. So even though the Moon Rover section got scrapped, you can still see some of the work that went into creating the exterior. But what players might not realize yet is that they didn't have to go outside at all.
Please tell me that's right. I think so. Okay. Oh, now I can go outside. What can I do? Just to be clear, I can't press this anymore, right? Or I need the guy to do it. No. Oh, but now that we've diverted the power back, maybe that means we can go back to where we came from? No? Monorail station online. Does that mean I can just go ride it?
Yep, the generators we turned on before power the monorail gates. So we could have just left after that. But since the open airlock is the first thing players see, it's likely they'll start looking for the next thing to do outside. When I first started working on this roof section, there was another puzzle here. There were no generators. Instead, the saboteurs had placed a water tank above the monorail gate. So you just had to move that. It was an easier puzzle. This is a better puzzle. But I think if we had replaced the ace panels with regular buttons for the astronaut to press, we would have fixed two problems. You wouldn't need any pipes for ace to fly through, so then we wouldn't violate how vacuums work. And then the airlock could always be unlocked, and not confuse anyone when the puzzle is finished. But yeah, once we're done on the roof, we can go downstairs and open the gate. This has been Copernicus Outpost 1. Hopefully players find it to be a fun little sidetrack to the greater journey. If I had to pick some favorite things about this level, it's probably the pacing and variation. You encounter an obstacle, find a hint for the solution, explore, solve a small puzzle, roam around with Ace, figure out a solution to your obstacle, backtrack while also getting to explore a new space. Find out you didn't have the full solution. Solve a tougher puzzle, this time with Ace, and then you overcome the obstacle for real. These are varied moments that keep you progressing towards a clear goal. Since a lot of the level is dedicated to finding the code, once you know it, the level becomes very speedrun friendly. But yeah, a lot of improvements could have been made to this outpost. Here are all the ones that I mentioned. You don't have to read these, I've already gone through all of them. Although the biggest suggestion, restructure the outpost, is not very specific. So let me show you one possible way I would rebuild it, through a rough blockout of the outpost. I'm just gonna tidy up a bit first. And of course, add a bathroom. The hallway had a window here that I now replaced with closed doors. These lead to the offline garage elevator, which I have moved a little bit. I have also made the 180-degree turn that used to be here into a 90-degree one. And the new wall is here to separate the homey communal space from the probably smelly garage. Beyond the door I replaced the ladder with stairs, so no more falling to your death. Halfway down the stairs we can see the vent we need to open, and it's at our eye level. So now the player doesn't need to awkwardly look up. On the off chance the player misses the vent anyway, I try drawing attention to it with a flickering, dangling light. Earlier in the game you visit a vehicle bay that has these cool rover areas. So I made a lighter version of that here. This also helps the architecture of the moon feel more coherent. In the real game, when you've sliced open the garage vent, this is how the pipes flow. You start off with a hard turn, smooth turn, a neck-breaking turn, another just as bad turn, hard turn, and a last hard turn. Making the pipes less disorienting would take a lot of work, because the best routes would either knock into the monorail track or become an obstacle in another room. So therefore, in my blockout, I'm gonna move the monorail away a bit, so that there's space for a pipe behind this kitchen wall. And now the pipes can flow like this. That's one smooth turn. Here we get a little peek of the sleeping quarters, so we know where we are and what we're heading towards. Hard turn. Smooth turn. And with a final hard turn, we're inside the sleeping quarters. And that's basically it. I hope you can see how I think these changes could lead to a more fun experience. These are of course my subjective opinions. You might disagree and have better ideas. Let me know. Let's wrap up with the 2 big lessons I learned at KeokeN. Plan out your project. For instance, if you're making a building, it's good to know how many rooms it will need before you set dress it. Otherwise, it's very likely you're gonna have to redo a lot of the work, or there won't be enough time, so you're stuck with an outpost without a bathroom. And secondly, be consistent, especially with rules. Which I wasn't when I created this pipe without an airlock. Consistency is so important. If the game itself doesn't follow its own rules, why would the player care about them? This is how you break immersion and world building. Don't make the same mistakes I did. However, I had a lot of fun working at KeokeN. And the game did well. It even spawned a sequel that came out in 2023. It has a much bigger scope. I didn't have anything to do with that one. But I find it very impressive how much they did with such a small team. They did an amazing job. If these games look interesting to you, please give them a try. In the sequel there are even less invisible walls.